Having had a couple of days to kind of sit in one of my favorite and quiet anchorages over the last week, one of the things I spent a lot of time in reflection upon, having had this peculiar lifetime of sailing philosophy and even esoteric tradition, sitting here watching the great blue herons fish and thinking about how this particular animal has captured the minds of thoughtful people around the world as some kind of epitome of perhaps Buddha mind, of enlightened consciousness, of connection, of all the rest. You see this bird represented in endless, innumerable pieces of artwork, in the martial arts, in meditative tradition, in all sorts of transcendent explorations of the esoteric. And then, with a few notable exceptions, after a lot of platitudes and cliches, we get it completely wrong. That bird is standing there on a log in near frozen water, hungry, its eyes turned outward towards the world, absolutely so physically engaged and focused on finding its own food, having the ability to literally pick up fish with a chopstick. It is so far removed in its consciousness from what we consider the transcendent. It is directed outward in the most extreme, in such an extreme manner that its egoism ceases to exist. And of course we, as we are so often prone to do, attempt to do exactly the opposite and reach the states of being that this bird represents by sitting comfortably, well-fed, in safe, warm conditions on a soft, cushy mat. Eyes not turned outward, but closed, ears not listening, but muted. A mind not engaged with other, but engaged with that which we imagine lies within, assuming, of course, that something does lie within. And even if it does, and I can grant you that it might, something somewhere, regardless what we are expressing by those activities is radically, radically different than what we see expressed or what we see as any kind of message or lesson in what that heron is expressing for us. And why do we make such a glaring and obvious mistake? Why is such a mistake so completely ubiquitous to the point of normalized? Well, I mean, as I go along here, it is a function of the culture and the society that we live in, which demands a disconnect from other to survive, for the very foundations of our existence are predicated on exploitation and harm. How is it that one can effectively turn one's eyes outward if one's very existence is predicated on the destruction of other? Well, we cannot unless one is somehow fractured, somehow insane. No, we have a culture where the turning within is necessary. Not desirable, but necessary. To have an intimate, thoughtful, conscious relationship with other will simply require too much pain unless there have been significant sacrifices and compromise made in one's life so that one may have the ability to relate with other in a manner that's complementary rather than exploitive. So from my perspective, and certainly being completely aware that we live in a culture that is desperate to the point of being rabid for connection with other, I would swear to you if the average individual was any more in touch with themselves, they'd rub themselves raw. Progress isn't going to be found there. What we've done is that too much and to exclusion of what we need to do. What we need to do is not reach further and deeper and more distal forms of transcendence. What we need to do is to muster courage and skill and the capacity to relate in the external world at a vastly higher level of intimacy. And this can be done, of course, as a practice, but the path to this practice is one of physicality, not mere intellectualism. And certainly it is one of courage rather than reticence. It's definitely one that is much less safe, this path. But the lessons of the lack of safety are what we're seeking. And while I'm not suggesting here lifestyles of recklessness or overindulgence, certainly I'm suggesting lifestyles with a great deal of intimacy and abundance of experience. And experience, I mean by that which is had with the external. And certainly that might leave you cold and in the dark and fearful at times, of course. I mean, that's part of my career path. But it is precisely those moments that have taught me the most. I can't really reflect on anything particularly that profound that I've learned from turning within. But there is a absolutely boundless universe of information and experience if one, in a courageous manner, turns one's eyes without. And if one masters the courage to do so and decides to take a chance, as the risk of ending up empty-handed is too much to bear, and you leave behind those individuals who are comfortable in soft robes and slippers, inhabiting a solipsistic dream state, if you leave those people behind, you will find that you are in good company of strong, robust individuals, thinkers like Parmenides or Empedocles or Pythagoras in the West, or the tantric thinkers of antiquity, certainly within the better thinkers within the Taoist tradition or Confucianism. These were individuals that had their eyes firmly directed outward. It is just that individuals who have not the courage to try to do so can only perceive these teachers and the messages that they provide for us from the perspective of an internalized dream state. And that couldn't be further from the message that they're trying to communicate. But again, my whole piety message here, and the lesson that I've learned from living on the waters here, is that if you want to emancipate yourself, if you want to grab for yourself the freedom to participate as a creative individual within the life and the circumstances that has been granted you, well, at some point you have to pick up your mat and walk. At some point you do have to take the chance of living your life in a manner that's likely not very safe and likely not very conventional. But I don't see that there are many options. There's certainly going to be people who are comfortable enough within their padded cells that they may not find the necessary compulsion to break free, but I doubt that many of you would be listening to my sermonizing if you are one of those. At some point we do have to give ourselves the permission to be the people that we need to be and to live our lives in the way we need to do so. I've done my best to do that, and I would encourage you to try the same. Cheers, people.